and that this breaks the hold that it's acquiring over people's minds and bodies. So other than that, I don't think there's going to be any kind of a political movement or reformers in Washington that are going to be able to roll this back. The courts might slow them down. There are still enough people on the federal bench that weren't put there by the Federalist Society who still believe in a balance of powers and civil liberties, and the courts may slow this process down. And let's hope they do, because the more it's slowed down, the more likely the power of the federal government is going to crack from its hubris and arrogance and overextension. I don't think the entire world is prepared to put up with the United States. They put up with us for a long time because we were saving them from the Soviet Union, or so they thought, and then because of the money we give them. But if the money goes and loses its magic because it gets inflated away, or the economy goes so much that there's no money to give anybody over there to control their governments and buy them, then they just don't cooperate with us in the same ways. And that would produce massive problems for the United States if China and Japan and Russia or Europe or the Saudis decided that cooperating with us was not any longer in their interest the way it had been in the past, or was less in their interest, or that less cooperation was more in their interest. This would produce enormous problems for the United States and would undermine the ability to imprison us all in some way or the other.
So how long are they going to put up with it?
You mean the foreigners?
Well, I mean, here, how long can the corruption just burgeon and spill out like a plague of locusts eating our flesh to the bone? I mean, how long can the arrogance and the hubris and the just open tyranny and open torture and open secret arrest and open wars and open lies, I mean, how long can evil be called good and good called evil? How long will the world put up with this? Where do you see this developing into now?
Well, I think that if it's that the American people are unlikely to call a halt to it. That if the halt is called, it'll be from foreigners. Our so-called NATO puppet states will cease to be puppet states. They won't want the association. The Russians and Chinese are already, digging in their heels. At some point, the instability that we cause in the Middle East will threaten our puppets there. And to save themselves, they may simply switch over. I don't think the United States has the power required for its aggressive program of hegemony at home and abroad. I just don't think it does. But I do agree with you that that's their intention. Their intention is to tyrannize us and the rest of the world. But I don't think, and I, of course, may be wrong, that they have the financial and moral and leadership and military power to achieve that. And when you think about them occupying the United States when they can occupy Baghdad.
Dr. Roberts, you were in Washington, you were in the White House, you were at the highest levels of government. When I watch Glenn Beck posing as one of us, but saying arrest Ron Paul supporters, use the army on us, that this horrible Bruner guy or whatever his name is at the Jewish Center, that he's a Ron Paul supporter, and he has CIA guys on saying that militia people work with Al-Qaeda. I mean, they know they're lying. They know it's bull.
Yeah.
And you look in their eyes, Beck's enjoying it. The CIA guy looked like he was losing his soul while he was doing it. But, I mean, how do they get CIA guys to really try to tyrannize the U.S.? I guess they just work for offshore corporate interests, and that's their job. I want you to comment on that in closing. And then one other point. The audit the Fed movement, it's going to the floor. They're trying to pull out every trick they've got, saying society will collapse if we audit the Fed. Can you speak to that and how it ties into Bank of America and GM and these companies being forced to be cut up and given to foreign interest?
All right, I'll say two things briefly. One, having been in the Reagan administration, I don't think anybody there, certainly not Reagan, none of us, could possibly have conceived of where the United States would be, a quarter of a century later. This type of behavior, I don't think we could even have conceived of it. We would have thought it was some kind of a science fiction film, or something. And and I never saw any of those kinds of intentions. It wasn't anything that, if anybody was concerned with it or was going on, it certainly wasn't anything that ever reached my ears or awareness. And I don't think it had anything whatsoever to do with Reagan or his intentions or what he was trying to do. So
there's been that big of a flip-flop and change in Washington culture. It's just...
In a quarter of a century, something has happened that none of us could have even dreamed of. Now, the question on auditing the Fed, it must be audited. The Fed doesn't want to be audited because they're allowed to use their profits for their own expenses. And then whatever's left, they are supposed to turn into the Treasury. So they probably don't want anyone to learn about their expenses. They probably live a grand life. They have that place up in Jackson Hole where they go every year for their conferences, and it's just, it's a grand life, and they probably don't want anybody to see their expenses. Now, of course, there may be other reasons they don't want to be audited, but I don't think a democracy or any kind of government can afford to have elements of it that aren't audited.
Do you understand how dark it is? How far down the line we are? How late it is?